a man armed with at least 2 handguns opened fire at about 9:30 this morning in the Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut. That is about 60 miles northeast of New York City. The police say at least 26 people were killed. 18 of them were children. The gunman is identified as Ryan Lanza. He is dead. Now, we don't know yet how he died, though police say he died in the school. He was in his early 20s, perhaps 24 years old, originally from the Newtown area. Lanza's mother was a teacher at this elementary school, and most of the shootings occurred in her classroom. She and some of her students were killed. Also, a body was found in a home connected to Lanza, and the motive for these shootings is not known at this hour. I want to go now to John Miller as we are still grappling with this terrible tragedy, which I think Melissa Macris, a mother, put it so well. This is a parent's worst nightmare, and certainly the parents of those school children who learned this news rushed to the school, many of them reunited with their children, but some parents learned the very sad news that their children had been killed and have been with the governor of Connecticut and others who are speaking with them. I know you've been speaking with your law enforcement sources. Describe what's going on at this moment as they are trying to find more information about the shooter and how he was connected to this.
Well, what's going on now is they're doing background investigations into the shooter, but they're also going to locations associated with the shooter, not just directly associated with Ryan Lanza, his residence, and they're looking for a location in New Jersey there, but also his family's residences in and around Connecticut. He has a father who is down in Stamford. He has a mother who is the teacher at the school, whose house is in Newtown. They went there. That's where they saw what appeared to be a body, and they're doing an entry there to see what else they can learn inside that house. And of course, they're spinning all the records and databases to get additional background. That will give them information, but it won't give them the why. The only way they're going to get the why is to get into his notes, get into his computers, get into his friends, see what was going on in his world and what he was saying about it.
All right, John Miller, stand by. I want to go to Bob Orr, who's been reporting some new information about the guns that were involved, at least two.
Can we back up 1 second on that? In addition, the AP is reporting that police have Ryan Lanza's brother in custody, and this is we wouldn't make too much of that. In a case like this, you would take that person into custody and start those interviews. The question is, where did they pick him up? And is there any involvement in this beyond the fact that he's his brother and they're going to want information from him? But as you know, we've heard echoes throughout the day of a second person being in custody, and that may be just to elicit information from his brother. There may be more to it. Too early to tell. I'm sorry. You can go to Bob
No,
now.
thank you for sharing those details that the Associated Press is now reporting his brother is in custody. A detail in this continuing investigation. I want to show everybody now live the White House press briefing room, the Brady briefing room, where the president is expected to appear at 3:15 and will address the nation in what is this school shooting, this massacre in Newtown, Connecticut, the second deadliest school shooting in American history. We will then hear from the governor of Connecticut. Let's go now to Bob Orr, who has been speaking with law enforcement officials and learning new details about the guns that were involved in this case, 2 handguns, at least 1 rifle. And then also, Bob, this AP report that John just brought us up to date on, that the brother may be in custody. What have you learned?
Well, I keep asking that question. All of our folks here are working the phones, and we're asking the question of various sources. Is there one shooter? Is there more than one shooter? Who is this second person that was detained at the scene? And I have to tell you, so far, all of the information we're getting, and it always comes with a caveat, but all of it seems to suggest there was just one shooter. The person who was detained near the shooting scene was a man described as wearing BDUs or khaki fatigues and lurking near the woods. And I had a number of people tell me, we don't really think he's a player in this. That said, now the Associated Press says they're talking to the shooter's younger brother. As John made the point, it might just be, and again, this is somewhat speculative, but it might just be this is due diligence by investigators to obviously want to talk to available family members and friends and close associates. So we can't say one way or the other at this point, and I think we need to be careful about not getting out there too far too fast, because as we've learned in the past with these kinds of big stories, the facts are kind of malleable and they tend to change. On the guns, we have a law enforcement official, Nora, telling us that with the shooter's body inside the school, the police have recovered 2 handguns. One is a Sig Sauer. As John mentioned, that's the kind of service revolver that the Secret Service carries. And the other is a 9mm, and that is kind of the weapon of choice for many police departments across the country. Both are very efficient weapons, kind of high-quality weapons, and would have allowed, if those were the 2 guns used in the attack, when they seem to be, the shooter great mobility and pretty precise targeting. In the car or in the vehicle, we're told they found a Bushmaster-type rifle. This is, you know, one of these assault weapons or semi-automatic assault weapons capable of firing the .223 round. The Bushmaster is the kind of gun used many years ago in the infamous sniper attacks here in Washington. John Allen Muhammad and Lee Boyd Malvo used that Bushmaster rifle to very deadly target people around the Washington area. But as far as we know, and again, it's still very early, as far as we know, that rifle, the bulkier, you know, more difficult to maneuver weapon, that rifle was not apparently used, and I say apparently used, in the attack, because the evidence seems to indicate the gunman died with only the 2 handguns. Now, a trace is still being done by the ATF and law enforcement officials to try to figure out the origin of these guns. This is standard in crimes, and certainly standard in high-profile crimes, to find out if the man, the suspect, the dead suspect, Lanza, if he owned them legally or if he got them from someone else or if they might have been stolen. And at least preliminarily, I'm getting indications that these weapons appear to have been his, the gunman. He was 24 years old and certainly within the age range, that made him eligible to have these weapons. And one more thing. We've also been looking through the databases, and as far as we can tell, Lanza did not have a criminal record, does not appear in any government terror watch lists, and there again, he would be a clean skin who would easily qualify to meet the requirements, even in a registration state, to own these weapons. So investigators are learning a lot. I get the sense from talking to people that they know a lot more than they're sharing. One of the early priorities here is twofold, really. One is to comfort the families, to put the families in the loop on the best available information. And also, from our perspective here in Washington, federal officials, and John will tell you this, are very mindful of not getting ahead of the state and local officials who are the first responders in this case. They're on the front line. We haven't yet heard, for example, from the Connecticut governor, and there is a protocol to these kinds of things that the information is kind of rolled out in an efficient and effective way, but also there's a political element to that. We know the president's going to talk shortly, and we understand the governor may have something to say also a little later on. Nora?
Bob Orr, thank you for that. And want to remind everyone that at 3:15, we are expecting to hear from the President of the United States, who will be in the White House briefing room. Want to bring in now Bob Schieffer, our chief Washington correspondent and host of Face the Nation. And Bob, we're expected to hear from the president shortly, and this is one of those moments where this country is in mourning and trying to figure out why something this horrible would happen, and the president will offer words of condolences, is my guess.
Well, it's going to be very interesting to see exactly what he does say, Nora, because, I mean, the question that we're all going to have to confront before this is over, one way or the other, is this the new norm? Is this what we are going to have to settle for? You know, normally in the United States, when we have a problem, we figure out a way to deal with it. I mean, look what and how much our society has changed. The airports, for example, once terrorism became a threat to this country, but yet over and over we're seeing these things happen where we have people who are mentally disturbed, people who have a grudge of some sort, have access to these weapons. Is this the way it's going to be from here on in? I think it'll be interesting to see what the president has to say on that very point. Yes, I'm sure he's going to offer condolences, but is he going to say maybe we should not settle for things like this? Maybe we should start thinking about how we can make it harder for people to carry out the kind of acts that we saw here, like we saw last week in a shopping mall, like we saw a couple of years ago when Gabby Giffords was shot, like we saw at the midnight show in Colorado. There is a strain running through all of these things. People say, gosh, it's so awful, but then you don't hear much about it afterward.
You know, and that's an important point, Bob. And of course, the president will be appearing in the Brady press briefing room, which is named after James Brady, of course, who took one of the bullets that was directed at President Ronald Reagan. That briefing room was named after him. And then James Brady and his wife became lifelong advocates of gun control. But we have heard from the press briefing that Jay Carney says now is not the time to talk about the assault weapons ban.
I guess the follow-up would be, when will be the time to talk about that? But my guess is the president probably won't take questions today. But it will be interesting to see what happens here and what's going to happen after this. I mean, how bad does it have to be for people to say, this is as far as we're going to let this go? I think that's the question that we as Americans have to confront now.
Bob Schieffer, stay with us as we await President Obama at the White House to address the nation. Want to go now to Major Garrett, who is there, who is in the briefing room. And Major, any indication what we may hear from the president?
Nora, we don't have an indication of how the president will mark this incredibly grim day in national history and a very grim moment for his own presidency. As was indicated, the president has responded to these mass shootings in the past, identifying to the country his own personal reaction as a father of 2 young girls, understanding that it is a moment for the country to try to reflect on all the issues that Bob Schieffer just raised a moment ago, but also try from a president's perspective to put this, if possible, into some sort of broader context and offer condolences to the most immediate victims and to the nation grieving hour by hour as the horrific details of this tragedy unfold. The president will, in just a minute, a couple moments behind me at the podium, try to do all of those things. As was mentioned just a moment ago, Jay Carney was asked first about the assault weapons ban and then asked the follow-up question that Bob Schieffer raised. When is the time to talk about it? He said, I can't tell you when the exact time is to talk about that, but it's not today. The White House, at least for the moment, does not want to inject, as Jay Carney, the White House press secretary, described it, a political and policy debate into this moment of tragedy where the country is still trying to grapple with the underlying details and what it may or may not all mean. And the president will try to address at least some of those issues when he takes the podium in just a couple of minutes. Nora?
All right, Major Garrett, stand by for just a moment as we await the president there in the briefing room at 3:15. Also, I understand that the flags have been ordered to half-staff at the Capitol, U.S. Capitol, and that probably means in other places around Washington as this country mourns this school shooting at the Sandy Hook Elementary School, where at least 26 are dead, including 18 children, where it looks like the gunman, Ryan Lanza, 24 years old, decided to target young children who were students of his mother, who was a teacher there. He also got into an altercation with the school principal, and she was also killed. One mother telling us here at CBS that this principal was a model principal, a great teacher. This was described as a great elementary school in a very safe area in Newtown, and many parents just struggling with this enormous tragedy. And as Melissa Macris said to us, whose daughter's a 4th grader, this is a parent's worst nightmare.